Hi, I'm Jeff Apodaca.
Eric Strauss.
And welcome to Let's Meet in the Middle.
In the middle.
Last week, I think we kind of met in the middle a little bit on city council positions. And
I don't think we did a good enough job with democracy dollars last week. I really thought we could have really painted the picture a little bit more adequately of just how much of a waste of money that is.
Well, and again, what we didn't talk about last week is over $400,000 has come into Olay and these PACs to basically promote some of this stuff.
This is my frustration right now, is you have the left pointing fingers at big money, dark money, and they're doing the same thing, but they shroud it in these nonprofits, and I get sick of it. And on Facebook, that seemed to be where people were weighing in a lot on Facebook Live on the show.
I agree too. Well, you know, one of the things I want to talk about this week is last week, the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party, they got together, and there was some yelling matches going on. Actually, the Democratic Party, we push this. A lot of us believe in open primaries, and the Democratic Party actually voted to have open primaries, and there was a yelling match, and that's a Facebook post. And you can see it on Democrats for Democracy, or you can see it on Let's Meet in the Middle Facebook page.
You talk a lot about.
But hold on. But it barely failed, 128 to 146. So the progressives are actually pushing for open primaries within the Democratic primary. They were short 9 votes, but there was. I thought it was interesting that Ben Ray and not really Ben Ray, but his staff got in a yelling match. So the old established new progressive movement in the party got a little heated about open primaries last week.
It's just, you talk a lot about open primaries. I want you to clarify for our viewers, you know, why are you in so much favor? Because you say it a lot, and I was thinking to myself, you know, I don't know if we've explained your position well enough.
Well, I think the reason open primaries...
Because I could go either way on open primaries.
Well, I think the reason open primaries work is in New Mexico, 32% of our voters are independent. They're not part of any party. So a third of the voters in New Mexico really have no say on what the candidates are. And since we have a two-party system, you really don't have a choice. And what's happening now and across the country is you're actually not voting for the better candidate, you're voting for the least candidate that you're concerned about. So I think that's why, and I think it's going to continue within the Democratic Party.
So moving forward with open primaries, so where do you see that opening the gates for these independent voters? So now they can vote for, you know...
I think it would open up the door to a lot more candidates running. In California, California's gone to complete open primaries, and then they take the top 2 winners into the general, and they've now seen 8, 9, 10 candidates running in one position, and their voter in the last 10 years, the voter turnout in the primaries is up 32%.
Old school Dems would be against this process because it allows too many independent voices into the elections.
Correct.
Is what you're saying.
Correct.
And so they're
less time to control some of the establishment.
Yeah, and so they can primary candidates they don't like and thin the field early. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it just gives everybody a voice.
So it levels the playing field.
I think it would level the playing field much more than democracy does.
So a couple interesting things went on. The Caravan of Hope. Did you hear about this?
I did not.
See, this was one of the really cool things that I think when people get together, and this is what bothers me about big government and them, you know, this talk of, you know, healthcare is a right and all these rights that we have as citizens. And when we allow people to do good things for each other as citizens, so this Caravan of Hope, they give away flu shots, family portraits.
Right.
I mean, just cool stuff that when people come together, this is, to me, is what charity is about. I'm on the board of Los Ojos de la Familia. And it was just a group of friends of us.
Guys,
We're getting ready to do our charity basket, food basket. We give away 250-pound food baskets with toys for the kids and everything. And I think that's really where charity begins, not with the government. So,
well, I don't disagree, but anyway, well, I also want to talk about Andrew Yang and his $1,000.
Yes.
And Andrew Yang, who's running for president, he wants to give everybody $1,000. Well, I just want the other night he compared
just $1,000.
No, but a month. But he compared it to Alaska, and I wanted to remind people that Alaska has the highest unemployment in the country at 6.2, and New Mexico, we're still number 2. It's gotten better, but we're still number 2 at 5.6% unemployment.
So again, it
goes back to he was trying to prove Alaska was like the state that, in his example, because they do give money out, $2,000 a year, by the way, and so I just need to prove an example. It just doesn't work.
To me, it just feels like a publicity stunt, and it's worked for him. because it's impractical.
Today we're going to be talking about veterans. So hey, let's get going. Let's meet in the middle.
In a time of a divided America, two people from different points of view sit down to talk about the problems, to talk about ideas, to talk about life, and to find common ground. It is now time for Let's Meet in the Middle with your hosts Eric Strauss and Jeff Apodaca.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle, and we're pretty much in the middle on this one.
No, I think this is, this is going to be more of an informative show. We really,
kind of celebration too.
Well, we're coming up on Veterans Day, and I think it's very important. You and I talk a lot, and I know you guys are very involved in the veterans organizations, and so we talk a lot about it.
For the veterans, like I get so many people reach out to me, Paws and Stripes, Folds of Honor, the Wounded Warrior, and as much as I can promote and help, I really do. Well, and that's where I met this brilliant man, Colonel Jim Quick, and you have been instrumental in growing and developing the Folds of Honor. Explain what Folds of Honor is and why it's so important for our veterans.
Folds of Honor raises funds for military families who have lost a family member or had one disabled. The funds we raise are dedicated to academic scholarships. We put kids through school. We put special needs kids where they need to be, where the VA doesn't get involved. 97% of the families that need our assistance get it from us, and it's a tremendous program. It's nationwide. We're now the Folds of Honor New Mexico chapter, which really is important for New Mexico and our efforts because we're putting money, 80% of what we raise goes to New Mexico military families that need our help.
See,
well, Colonel, really I think that's real important too, because I think a lot of people, we look at the vets and everybody thinks about the VA, right? The VA is very important, but people forget about families and forget about the younger kids and vets coming back, and that's really what we want to talk about today. So tell us a little bit about some of the scholarship programs that you guys are doing here locally, because I've played in your golf tournament before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so it's a great charitable event that you guys are doing, but tell us a little bit about the scholarships for families and stuff.
Well, we just got notice, and it's just relatively new news because our cycle is every September is when the Folds of Honor allocates the scholarship. So we just found out we've got 37 active scholarships here in New Mexico. Wow. All of those average about $5,000 apiece. So that puts us really behind the 8 ball in raising that amount of money to support our New Mexico veteran families. The tough part, and the part where you guys can help, and this program outreach can really help us, is in finding qualified families, because when that devastating event happens and a mother's stuck with a family and no provider, for example, they go back home. Generally speaking, they go back home. And when they go back home in New Mexico, it can be to rural areas, and we don't have the reach to reach out to those folks and say, hey, we're here to help you. Yeah. So we need help in getting the word out.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that New Mexico, percentage-wise, we have one of the highest percentage of veterans that live in our state, and so organizations like you do a lot of help.
I think too, to me, I find that people don't want to reach out for help, and it's like, especially these proud veterans, they're like, they want to, come home and try to make it on their own, and a lot of times they don't want to reach out for help. And it's not just fallen soldiers, correct? It's soldiers who also have been injured.
That's right. That's right. Injured. There are a lot of criteria on the Folds of Honor website. For example, 15% disability is determined by the VA. That's a qualifying disability that gets you a scholarship and members of your family scholarships. Loss of a limb, MOWPIA, I'm sorry. Just so many different caveats. I think there are 7. The application process is very simple. The scholarships are granted in perpetuity until the child or the person reaches their academic goals through college. So we go all the way through the bachelor's degree. So right now in New Mexico, personally here in Albuquerque, we know of 3 families, special needs in all cases, where young 8- and 9-year-olds are going to school that they would otherwise not be able to afford. So that's where we step in and say, we got your back.
Do your scholarships, they go to scholarships at education at every level, or is it college?
Every level. It can be tech school, kindergarten, every level.
That's fantastic.
Right up through
it really is a great organization. And I think the key is that finding families to reach out to you guys and actually apply for the scholarships and apply for the assistance. I was blown away by when we first met. This was gosh, how many years
5
ago
years
now?
ago
5,
now.
yeah, wow. And the first gala I went to, and they play a slideshow. Can you talk about that and what that means to people who come to the event? And because I had no idea. And
Let
then
me tell you,
yeah.
I'll tell you where that came from. When I came home from, I did 2 tours in Vietnam, and I came home from both of them, not to a welcoming committee in the airport. I came home to San Francisco International Airport to get on another flight being spit on by hippies, people sleeping in the airport, get up and accost you if they think you're in the military. And it was just an ugly time in America.
Yeah.
And it was a righteous war. We never lost a battle. We were there for a really good reason, but it wasn't popular in America to be a veteran at that time. So when it came up that we could have a program that honored veterans as they need to be honored, I went to the veterans website that the state has, and on there were pictures of all now 87 fallen military members since 9/11.
Yeah.
So at every gala, it's become a routine for us to show our respect for every one of those soldiers. We show their face, we show the years that they've been on Earth, the date they were killed, and it takes 4.5 minutes is all to just take a look at those young men and women that gave their life voluntarily to our country. And there's another thing we do. We recognize civilians for providing military support here in our community. And 2 of them a year have been given the recognition that they deserve for reaching out to the military. I think that's so important and was so missing in the 60s and 70s
Yeah.
when I was in the military.
Let me ask you, on a personal note, coming back from Vietnam, today's environment's much different, also, obviously, but can you talk a little bit about, besides your organization, but a little bit about the veterans? Because I think our younger generation doesn't remember the hardships that our veterans came through from Vietnam, and I was like middle school, teenager, so I remember that. What is the difference that some of the veterans today are having to deal with versus the veterans from the Vietnam years?
Well, there was a big difference. There was a draft back in my day.
Right.
So if you were drafted and you didn't like the military, you got out in 4 years. If you did like the military, like I did love flying fighters in the Air Force, I stayed for 30 years. Yeah. It was great for me. And I watched the culture of America change to, once we're attacked, and we've forgotten Pearl Harbor. We were never attacked in the Vietnam years,
right,
but we were attacked on 9/11. That's a big difference. That's when America said, hey, volunteers, go defend our freedom. And they did, and they're still doing it. We have, in New Mexico, the last time I checked with General Nava, our Adjutant General, we have 120 citizen soldiers overseas in various countries, serving in countries that we probably never even heard of, doing jobs that no one else will do to stabilize law enforcement in a downtrodden country, so that the bad guys don't get a toehold and come back to do another 9/11 or blow up an elementary school, or do the kind of things that they like to do to show off their whatever.
Well, later in the show, we're going to be talking about PTSD and business opportunities. Your organization, I get what they're doing, but do you see more of that today with our veterans versus the Vietnam, Korean years?
There's a lot of support in the community to hire veterans. Probably not enough, but it's there, because I think a lot of smart businessmen understand that when you hire a veteran, you're hiring someone that's been through military training, military service, and that they're probably going to be high character, high integrity kinds of people that can learn, that can do a hard job and work long hours to do it. I think that's what you get in a vet, just as a broad statement. That's been my experience in any case. So when we get those people back from this superior basic training that these young men and women go through today, they come back as they know how to form a team, work on a team, and build an organization, be part of it.
Well, you know, it's funny, on a side note, because you're Air Force, correct? Right. And so, you know, one of our biggest concerns is, you're talking about training, I've always said the military has trained engineers, fighter pilots, some of the best trained civilians we have all came from the military. And that's some of the, you know, that's one of the concerns I have on the military cuts, that sometimes it helps the civilian community so much that those military cuts actually hurt us even more on a capitalization
I
side.
love it when you sound like a Republican, by the way. It's just a side
Dude, I
note.
just sound like a
It
common sense guy.
It just sounds good to me. Invest in the military and.
Well, no, because I'm going to tell you right now, Colonel, would you agree that some of the long-time career pilots came from the Air Force?
And it's the same offshoot with investing in NASA. I mean, how much technology came out of NASA? And when we invest in our military, it's that offshoot, those unintended consequences of positivity, I call them, where we're training future engineers and we're growing industry around the military, which is all, and keeping our country safe at the same time. I mean, at the end of the day, and as we honor our veterans, if we don't have the biggest stick, America, and say China does, what is this world going to look like at the end of the day? Because everybody thinks China's real pacifist, and they aren't. And I think people forget the dangers that are kind of at the wolf at the door, or the analogies of that.
Well, I think we have to be ready. And how we determine readiness is both a military and political thought process. The use of the military is a political process. The management of the military is what the military does best.
Right.
So General Mattis, when he was the Secretary of Defense, remarkable man, retired 4-star Marine, and I think he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, perhaps. He said something very interesting. He said there have been, in the last 5 wars, only one done right, and that was the one that the senior George Bush did in Iraq Desert Storm. It had a clear political objective with a military objective. We achieved those objectives and we came home. Unfortunately, we had to go back, and we're back.
Right.
But in the meantime,
back to stay for a while, I think.
well, it's getting thinner and thinner.
Right.
The troops are coming home.
Yeah, they are.
But the mission's not over with, and I think we'll continue to see our involvement in that respect.
Yeah.
But the most remarkable thing that we have, and no other country in the world has it, is we have depth of readiness. We have active duty troops at Fort Campbell, Holloman Air Force Base, you name it, they're there, they're ready to go. They're training for the eventuality of deployment. Then what happens if they deploy over in Europe somewhere, Middle East, and North Korea rattles their sword? What do we do then? Well, we've got the Guard.
Right.
We've got the reserves. We've got all these other citizen soldiers and people ready to go. That's America, and that's
Colonel,
readiness.
I want to thank you so much for coming in today and
Thank
talking
you.
to us. Let's
It's an
remember,
amazing organization.
It is.
Folds
Let's
of Honor.
remember
We'll have
Folds
your
of Honor,
website up.
and if you want to play in their golf tournament or help raise money, please get involved. Business community.
FoldsOfHonor.org. That's all you got to do.
Great,
And go to New Mexico and find out about all our events. We'll be posting next year's events when we're really nailed down.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for your service to
thank
our
you.
country, by the way.
And we'll be back with our sponsor, Indigo Mortgage. And don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook Live. But after this commercial, we're going to talk about PTSD and some new treatments about that, and also about business opportunities. We'll be back right after this.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
Find us on Facebook at Let's Meet in the Middle, or you can email us at meetinthemiddlenm@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Joining us now is Tom Padilla from Research and Recognition Project. And I was going through your stuff. It's a lot there. So I'm just wondering how you got into helping vets with post-traumatic stress syndrome. Or I didn't know if I don't like the syndrome. My producer on my radio show came up with a new term for it, and I can't remember it right now. So, but why?
Well, thanks for bringing that up, by the way.
Yeah.
No, but we have talked PTSD
is real.
And the reason we wanted Tom on is Tom and I, whether it's at a local game or whatever, they immediately go to drugs and help some of our veterans with drugs. And Tom brought this up to me, gosh, I think last year, what you guys were doing. And when we started the show, that was one of the first things I said is we have to do a show on this.
Yeah.
And it's non-medical treatment for PTSD, and they're having huge success. But I'll let Tom talk a little bit about
why don't you start with your journey on how you got involved with the Research and Recognition Project, and if you know how your work with veterans have been helping, and what's the foundation? That's a lot to get to.
That's a great question, though. And how I became involved in this was actually almost an accident and unintentional. And by the way, I'll elaborate a little bit more. We call it PTSI. It's an injury that can be healed. It is not a disability or a disorder.
That's what.
It is an injury, and I think you'll see why we say that it can be healed and can be helped with what we're doing. But about 4.5 years ago, I was like most businessmen. I mean, I'm here for the research and recognition, but I'm a local businessman. I'm in the insurance business with Hub here in town, and been here in town in 40 years in business. But I was part of planning a national meeting, and I'm associated with the construction industry, do a lot of military construction. Myself as a veteran of the Air Force, although a non-combat vet. My father was in World War II. My daughter is on active duty, has been to Afghanistan. So I've got some military ties, like you were saying with the earlier guest. New Mexico's heavy military. So we were looking basically to benefit some kind of an organization. Let's just raise a little money, which is what most business people do. Let's face it. We say, well, how can we help? Well, we can open our checkbooks.
Yeah.
And what happened was totally unexpected. At this meeting, happened to be in San Diego, and our keynote speaker was a recently retired vice admiral. But he pulled a young man up on stage and said, I want you to hear this young man's story. And this young man was a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. And he began to tell a story of being in a place he called the Triangle of Death, being in Afghanistan. His name was Doug Baldwin. To this day, we're close friends. He's a great story. But he was the typical, falling off the edge of the earth, no family to support him, about to flunk out of college. And he'll tell you himself he contemplated suicide when the Blue Angels Foundation was beginning to do some research on this. So he became one of the tests in a study. And Doug stood up there for about 10 minutes, and we had about 600 of the most influential people from national companies in the room that never looked at a cell phone, never looked at a text, tears in their eyes, and we thought we'd raise 10 or 20 grand, and 30 minutes later we'd raised $130,000.
Wow.
Thought we were done. They figured out I was from New Mexico, and there's a place called the Mind Research Network here. Dr. Jeff Lewine does some incredible research. He's one of the foremost guys. He's a great neurologist here. And they had never been able to marry up because Research and Recognition is from New York. So they called me. They said, do you know where this is? Look, New Mexico's a small town. Right. I'll just call the guy.
Right.
Go down, and of course, knew somebody he knew. And when we got done, and he said, you know, I thought these guys were crazy at first, but I'm starting looking at what's happening. And he said, Tom, we'll work with you if you can raise the money for these studies and that. But you need to understand one thing. I'm a scientist, not a medical doctor. I'm going to blow this apart if I can. I'm going to confirm it if I can, but my job is to be objective. And I said, then you're the guy. He's now one of our biggest advocates.
Wow. Well, you know, Tom, when we started talking about this, let's be very frank. You know, there's 22 veterans a day that commit suicide in the United States, and again, when you look at New Mexico, it's a high percentage. We always talk.
How about homelessness as well?
Well, we talk about homelessness, and we know that there's a big majority of homelessness. And the first response at the VA hospital, nothing against the VA, but the first response is let's medicate. Let's medicate. And I was really, you know, interested and intrigued because that's the last thing you guys do is medication. It's really all about therapy and talking through it. Talk to us a little bit about the specific therapy treatments and what goes on and the successes you're seeing.
So the RTM protocol, simply put, is non-drug, it is drug-free, it's non-traumatic, and the key thing for vets to understand is there is no reliving of the incident. So what the VA does also, and again at the VA, let me say this, what I've learned is those first 2 or 3 layers of caregivers are wonderful people. It's the machine in the middle, as with anything. As with anything. Yeah. So I don't ever want to disparage someone at the VA who's on the front line, because these are wonderful people. And we've got a lot of them trying to come over and work with us, and we're meeting some resistance. But nonetheless, so it's called RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memory. So what we're saying is it's not necessarily, I'm always careful to say, it's not like a cure for PTSD, but what is, see, I did it for post-traumatic stress, not PTSD. Right. So what it is really is it's a conversation between the therapist. It's a script where they teach them to rerun a movie within their mind. Key to knowing this is they never let the veteran experience the panic or the terror. I've been privileged to watch it demonstrated live. And anytime the veteran starts to get aroused, or they do what they call break state. Literally within an hour and a half, 3 to 5 treatments, what they're doing is teaching your brain to reframe the memory and to take the terror that you associate or the panic and move it over here. The memory, strangely enough, becomes clearer. The veteran becomes more aware of everything they did every second in that fight or whatever they did, but there's just no more terror. They can tell you over a cup of coffee about getting blown up in a battle and saving lives, and it's the most incredible thing you've ever seen.
In the
So
paper,
it's reconsolidation.
Reconsolidation.
And so you're taking this traumatic event and you're finding a different way to channel the memory of the terror, which is the terror is the foundation of the trauma, I assume.
So that's pretty close. So it's the way that the doctors describe it is, it's not that to rechannel, it's to disassociate. So the way Dr. Lewine explains it, the neurologist, is that your brain does some of this every night with memory. It moves things to memory. Yeah. So I liken this to a breaker. When the breaker throws at your house, you go back and you reset the breaker. This breaker's stuck. So that's why it's not a disorder or disability. Your mind, your brain did what it was supposed to because something happened, right? So they teach you to reset that in such a way that you open the file cabinet. This is Dr. Lewine's words. You open the file cabinet, you pull the file out, and you shuffle the papers in such a way that it takes the emotional part and puts it over here. So you can tell me about the car wreck you were in high school without screaming like you did in the car wreck, right?
Right.
They can't do that with the explosion that went off or something. So interestingly, and if they have to do it with multiple traumas, like we did a young combat medic, lost 18 guys. When he did the second or third one, it's like your brain went, it figured it out, like dominoes.
Because you're telling me, when we talk about this, you're telling me after 3 or 4 treatments, they're seeing huge success. If I recall reading some of the documents, 73, 75% success rate so far?
No, sir, 90%.
90% success rate.
90+% rate in this. And some of those, we can't count it as a success unless they do all 3 treatments. I know guys that have gone 1 or 2 times. And
so you and I have talked, so the VA does a comparison. The VA is treating them a certain way, seeing huge failures. What kind of cooperation are you getting from the VA hospital? And again, we're not here to dog the VA hospital, but it's always a new way, right? That always is challenged by MD doctors. Is the VA coming around? Tell me a little bit about the relationship there.
Certain parts of the VA are starting to come around, and certain people inside the VA are coming around. And I understand. So the VA, everybody's got a new treatment every week. I get it. I've heard of everything from board games to, as some of these are wonderful, the horse programs, whether it's different programs that give them therapy through artwork. Some of it helps, okay? So some of it's good, but we call it the Sea of Goodwill. We're in competition with over 40,000 501c3s that are in existence just for veterans. That's just vets, and it's probably closer to 50 now. So they hear it every day. So when we went over there, of course, our people went up there, and it was probably, come on, you guys got to prove it. What frustrated me originally and how a lot of this came to New Mexico is they said you've got to reach what they call evidentiary medicine status. It'll take you at least 12 years. So we don't have 12 years. As I told you, this is 4.5 years later. So what we're doing now is not inside the VA, but it's kind of forcing them to come around because we're doing this with civilian therapists. And that was where I got mad and said, we're turning this to civilians. And the guys in New York told me I was crazy, and they're probably right to some degree.
Because let me get this straight. It kind of started in New York. It kind of started after 9/11, right? So
it started after 9/11.
It's not just for veterans. It was after 9/11.
No, I can see application for this
across the board.
Even as a teacher, I'm thinking to myself, I get kids every day with PTSD.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this could be applied to a lot of different areas.
And we have with kids.
Yeah.
And you've taken success from 9/11 trauma that they had, and then you've kind of rolled that in. And New Mexico's kind of leading this now, right?
Yep. New Mexico was out front. This is the first place that we ever trained what I'll call civilian counselors, non-military. We did the first training here at the Mind Research Network. We've done 3 trainings in New Mexico. We have the highest concentration per capita we've got about 50 counselors already here in New Mexico out of a little more than 100 in the country.
Wow.
So one of mine is to show a little bit of my little New Mexican red ass, if I can use that word, is I challenge everybody to say, let's be first at this and let's lead the country because of our veteran population. I mean, we have people out on the reservations that this is beautiful because you can go out there. You don't need a clinic. You can go out with a motorhome.
Right.
Yeah.
You can do this. There's even talk of later being able to do it over video when we get it better.
And I want to go back in the story a bit. So you went to a scientist to debunk this.
Yes, sir.
And just kind of report back on why he became such a fan of it.
So in short, what we did is I've given you some pictures of the first 3 guys that went in, and we took, those are EEGs of the human brain, and you can see on one side they're lit up, right? And it's just like we all know your brain lights up for certain things. The left side is 3 veterans that went in, lit up, did the treatment, and 7 days later the right side is the same EEG. That's why he will tell you to this day he doesn't necessarily know exactly, even though this is the guy who maps your brain for surgery, we don't know how the brain works perfectly. So he became, you know, one of our biggest advocates. He's actually got a study that he's published and submitted to the American Journal of Medicine now. We actually are coming around. Walter Reed is doing a study right now. King's College in England is doing a study in Belfast. So some of the institutions are coming around, but Dr. Lewine was able to do that.
Let's talk about this. What's more important is our veterans that are watching, or the veterans out there, how do you reach out to the veterans? How can the veterans get involved and come as patients and help them out?
And if they're out there on medication, why not try something if it's not working for them? Why not reach out to you guys and just see, hey, maybe this could work. It's non-invasive, it's non-traumatic.
How do you guys recruit veterans? How do veterans find you?
So the hardest part, because they don't trust for a good reason.
Right.
They've gone, many of them, to the VA or somewhere else. Who helps us most of the time are other veterans who've been through it. So there is an organization that's not here that I work closely with, but it's 22022zero.org. And Dan, who's a very good friend of mine that's been through this protocol, is a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq. And he's been through every treatment they have, the VAs and everybody, and he'll tell you. So even if they want to be anonymous, just go to 220.org. He'll send you right back to a counselor here. I'll be happy to share information. I have a list of counselors here, you know, in New Mexico that I can send somebody to. But what you do have to do is the veterans are understandably a little bit distrustful. So I try and connect them with another veteran. I have a guy here who is the head of the Purple Hearts, a Vietnam veteran, which is another thing that's really cool. This has worked as far back as Korean War vets. So we're being able to bring guys home, as I call it, after 40 or 50 years. But what I like to do, if they're distrustful at all, call me. Have a cup of coffee with a vet who's been through it. One of your own guys who's been through combat and who's been through this. Don't listen to me. Listen to the other vets that have been through, and that's the effective way to recruit vets.
Right. Well, you know what? We're gonna come back after commercial break. We're gonna come back. We're gonna talk more, and we're gonna actually Teresa Latson's gonna join us. We're gonna talk about also opportunities, business opportunities, and job growth. But and don't forget,
getting healthy and then getting financially healthy.
Right. Exactly. Don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook Live, New Mexico Democrats for Democracy. Let's meet in the middle. We'll be back right after this.
I am a nurse,
a firefighter,
a college student,
a mother,
and I am an American soldier.
I will always be ready
for every storm
and disaster that threatens my community.
I will always be there to protect my neighbors,
my family,
and my country.
We are the Army National Guard.
We are the Army National Guard.
We are the Army National Guard.
Visit nationalguard.com to learn more about part-time service.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Joining us now is Tessa Latson from Albuquerque Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Hold on, Jeff. Hold on, Jeff. Let me finish talking, Jeff.
I was told that I called her Teresa, so I apologize. It's Tess.
Did he not just interrupt me?
See, but I want to make sure.
He totally interrupted me. I love it.
I answered anything.
So we had been talking before, during the break about you actually got to experience one of these sessions, and I just want to paint for the people that are watching the show, because I can tell the passion that you guys have for this. And Tom, you can tell you're 1,000,000% in on this. And it seems like you watched one of these sessions too, and was immediately like, this is it. This is what we need.
Yeah, and I'll say, to preface it by saying, so I was born in 1975, a couple months after Vietnam War ended. But I grew up, most of my classmates, fathers predominantly, were vets. So my generation, us Gen Xers, they say we're kind of cynical and bitter. Well, we grew up with a lot of PTSD in our lives.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And a lot of it undiagnosed, too.
Yes. A lot of concurrent alcoholism, addiction, abuse, including in my family. So, and I grew up in I didn't grow up here, I grew up in very rural New England. More cows than people in the town I grew up in. So people, you know, and very stubborn Yankees too, who just don't want to admit anything's wrong with them. I mean, I think that's pretty endemic of a lot of places, especially rural places like New Mexico too, to say, well, I'm fine. I'm just going to get on with it. But it was very dysfunctional, right? So I see a lot of my peers in this similar kind of work. I would say social idealism, yes, but with this very kind of acute pragmatism because of the stuff we've seen and experienced. So, I mean, for me, I've been working around marginalized populations, disabled populations, including service disabled and disabled veterans for almost 20 years here in New Mexico. And so, yeah, when I was able to have the privilege to be invited by Tom to observe this RTM protocol, there was skepticism, but hope. And such curiosity, because how could something affect someone so positively in 75 minutes?
Yeah, right. I would be skeptic too.
Well, and I want to take this because just so you know, Tess she's the director of the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. She heads up the Dallas Economic Opportunity Center.
Yeah.
And really, what you're doing is working with Tom's organization, really finding jobs and job opportunities, working with the business community to get our veterans jobs and economic growth. And that's things we talk about all the time. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the chamber and the Economic Development Opportunity Group.
So really exciting. I oversee about 8 grant-funded programs. We were just, shout out to P&M Foundation. They took a chance on this. We had meetings beforehand, before we even applied, to educate them on the needs of veterans. Took about a year with a veterans advisory group that we had formulated through the chamber to talk about what the needs, what the gaps were in hiring, in employment needs, concerns. Some of the folks from our delegation were involved as well. And so really got a good sense that a lot of what was missing was employer education. That, yes, in general, to the Colonel's point earlier, vets are amazing, highly skilled, adept candidates for hire. Absolutely, hands down. However, over the years, especially post 9/11, there's been a lot of increasing stigma and fear, specifically around PTSD. And so when you have that stigma and fear and a lot of implicit bias around hiring veterans, combined with other issues, other skill gaps, what we refer to as what we've seen talking with veterans themselves, there's the culture of the military culture, and how that doesn't always jive with workplace civilian culture, right? And so, yeah, so nationally, it's a pretty staggering statistic. 60% of veterans after 24 months lose their job or walk off the job.
See, that amazed me. You actually, you and I have talked about that in the past.
Doesn't amaze you because I can see it in my mind's eye when you explain it.
Explain that though, because that surprised me that it was that high of a number. But when you explained it to me, it made complete sense.
Well, and to back up and say, like, they get a lot of training and education and do a lot of work. I mean, capstone type work before leaving active duty, or in the case of career military, right? You know, 20 years plus. You go through several months of work to figure out what you want to do and how those skills are transferable out in the civilian marketplace. But a lot of times, there's a disconnect even there, because sometimes you don't always have a match, right? If you've been finding, you know, bombs for 10 years, and then how does that translate into, you know, I want to be an IT support? I mean, not exactly, right? So there's that challenge of finding the skills fit. But if you're only looking at the skills fit and you're not talking about awareness and education, communication around how to operate and exist in civilian life. I mean, I had an amazing veteran intern who I asked to be part of the show this morning, but she's actually with a state office right now who's a close partner of mine on this program. 23 years Air Force. She came in to intern as she was exiting her career with the Air Force, and I jokingly said, "Oh, we don't have to wear pantyhose in the workplace." And she was like, "Wait, we don't? Oh God, thanks." You know, so even stuff like right? So there's that disconnect.
I liken it to, I had a student, was a servant, ultimately killed himself, and the whole point was he had watched Amadeus, and just by watching the movie could play every song in the movie. He was he couldn't get his arms around the fact that the world was imperfect. And to me, it seems like when you take these military people and they have clear objectives, they have clear duties, they know what, and they're adaptable.
And it's a hierarchy.
And and you put them in an organic environment, it's like a round peg in a square hole sometimes because the objective isn't as clear as it was in the military. Not that they can adapt, but they haven't been trained enough to adapt.
And when you think about the current HR environment, well, the current meaning the last 10 years or more of, you know, folks wanting to have innovative, creative, self-starting people. Well, military folks, I mean, self-starting, I mean, it's a different way, it's a different framework. You know, they need the structure, they need the direction, they want it, they're used to it. Are they able to go and complete missions? Yeah, but you got to have the understanding of those frameworks. And so that's where the chamber is kind of, finding that place.
Well, and I think sometimes with the Small Business Administration and you guys working together, people forget too, some of the business owners, some of the business leaders are veterans.
Yeah.
And
so
I've
known John Garcia heading up SBA for years.
Well, and I think there's so much opportunity. You know, I've talked to people about this. Like an example is Sandia Labs has $135 million annually in subcontracts. Typically, they want to give 3 to 6% of that business to veterans, and we only do about 0.5% right now. So if we can help veterans start businesses, talk a little bit about that between the chamber and SBA, because I think that's a huge economic growth for our veterans and for our state.
Absolutely. So part of what the BEOC, my department, Borellis Economic Opportunity Center, does as well is we have a procurement specialist on staff. We actually have a procurement summit November 13th. Specifically for small businesses, of how to connect to buyers in the state to increase procurement opportunities and contracting, how to look at the smaller shops to team together to be able to apply successfully for those contracts. And so there's a huge gap, like you said, and a huge need. SBA is going to be there with us. The SBDC, all those folks. The labs, they're some of the sponsors, you know. So how to come together and say, yeah, did you know that there are these extra points and there are specific objectives, not only in contracting but in hiring. I was part of a federal employer hiring initiative years ago with Kirtland and Forest Service and U.S. Army Corps here to create a model federal employer curriculum on disability, which included veterans. So what people don't understand is with contracts as well as with hiring, there are preferences. There's veteran hiring preferences, there's veteran contracting preferences, which is huge. And then if you're
veterans don't know that.
No, and then if you're service disabled, you get extra points.
Well, and I think, you know, we always laugh about government spending, but you know, I actually looked this up because the state of New Mexico has various contracts, but over $5 billion a year in goods and services, and then between all our labs, we have over almost over $250 million. And even right now, I looked this up today, there are 87 open contracts today for veterans that we can't fill because there's not enough veterans that are starting businesses. If we just focused in on that, $75 million economic growth for the state of New Mexico just by helping veteran businesses kind of grow.
Exactly.
So how did you two become connected? Because to me, it makes sense in my mind. I can totally see the connection. But if you're out there watching, maybe how did the BEOC and Tom, your organization, get connected, and what do you see as the future moving forward?
So how we met, frankly, is myself and Tino, who she mentioned before, and Ernie at the chamber. We actually attended a play called Last Out that's put on by a veteran, a Green Beret named Scott Mann, who's all into the veteran transition world and helping veterans transition out and come from a unit like you talked about where it's different into an individualistic society. So through that, I met Tino and I talked to Ernie, and they said, you know, we have this initiative, so come down and meet. And they introduced me to Tess. And one of the things that we talked about was we said, I'm tied to the construction industry heavily. said, you know, I've got a lot of contractors that would love to hire these guys, but if the smell of diesel sets them off or something happens, or they're having issues in veteran transition, like getting their disability approved and still being able to come over here, we need to tie together. So she said, well, that's perfect. We can work together. You know, bringing veterans back into the workforce and helping them it's not one thing with the PTSD or one thing with the training or one thing with finding the job. It's a lot of things that have to come together. They're coming back into a different society.
Right, and it's the family, right? So it's a full spectrum, holistic. Tino would always laugh at me because he's like, you're such a flower child, using the word holistic all the time. I'm like, but then I read a study from Syracuse University's Institute for Veterans and Military Families, and they used the word holistic, and I said, Tino, see, they even use it. So it's to say, right? Yeah, but that's to say, and now when I bring up IVMF up, and I'll share the website with you guys to share with your viewers. They're our partners. I was able to receive the grant funding from PNM Foundation to bring Syracuse University here to New Mexico. They have 13 sites of employer coalitions, similar to what we're going to start here, which will then integrate a referral system to all these ancillary holistic resources, right, to veterans, their spouses, and their family to integrate as successfully as possible into civilian life, including employment, including, you know, social adjustment in schools, you know, the whole nine. And so that's part of that. And so we're really excited too, because IVMF has been wanting to come to New Mexico for a long time. They haven't found the right partner or vehicle to do that, and so we're happy to provide that through the chamber. And then they come with such a wealth of research and knowledge and resources, predominantly online in terms of people being able to access. You know, one of the challenges that a lot of vets, that we hear vets have, as well as employers, quite honestly, right, the two sides. Where do you get all this information? How can I hire veterans? Yeah. Or how can I find out what resources there are for my family? You know, I want to relocate, or I'm exiting the Air Force and I want to stay in New Mexico. I like it, but I'm from North Carolina. What does that mean? What do I do? Yeah. So how to work also kind of in the second and third phases of this to do some wraparound services to help de-silo the multitude of resources, to your point, around all of the nonprofits doing great work.
The sea of goodwill.
The sea of goodwill, yes. Right? And how to streamline the process so folks can get what they need on both sides of the fence. So employer side, so
because
yeah.
a lot of the veterans we hear about are homeless and things like that. Are there programs that you guys are working with on that front too, Tom, to walk into your program and then transition over to job opportunities? Because that's really where it starts.
Well, I mean, we are trying to get, you know, to make contacts and make connections. Some of the new stuff they're talking about that's going to be voted on with a, you know, where they're talking about putting things together to get them services. Homeless guys or women are hard, but we've recently trained a counselor at the vet center where some of them go. That's our first entrance into the vet center here.
Yeah, I mean, and I have,
actually, real quick to that point, you've also found a way to link insurance to help pay for the cost of the RTM protocol. And I'm sure is the Borellis Economic, are you guys trying to channel where you could get and help financially to get people into the RTM protocol as well?
That's going to be a goal. We haven't, right. I was just telling him, like, I'm still working on the one sheet about our program. That's how new it is. It's taken over a year to figure out what this is going to look like, and all the moving parts. So this is really, I think, the formal public launch of what we're calling the ABQ VCEC, Vet Connect Employer Coalition, which is the first phase in partnership with Syracuse University's IVMF Institute, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, to assess the landscape of veteran services here and how to pull in some champions from our business community, of which I'm going to say PNM will be one of them, because they were recognized in 05 or 06. I was there when they were recognized for their veteran hiring initiatives. The current folks at the foundation said, oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't here then. I said, well, let's bring that back, right? So to get a real core of those employers who are champions, educate and inform them on veteran culture, military culture, the needs that they can have as a resource through their HR folks, like the RTM protocol and others, and then go from there. And so funding, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of what I do is seek funding. So
Well, and I think P&M's done a great job kind of funding those kind of programs, but it's real important to kind of tie it all together because there's so many veterans out there looking around.
Yeah.
Now we have about a minute left, so I want to make sure that Tom, wrapping up, and Tess, you know, if we haven't covered anything, is there something with about a minute to go that that we haven't covered that you see, you know, opportunities for our veterans?
In 1 minute or less. I mean, you know, all I can say is that if you've got interest in it, whether you're a counselor, we're training counselors. It costs us less than $2,000 to train a counselor. It costs us less than $1,000 to train a vet. Reach out to me through researchandrecognitionproject.org.
reach out to me.
Reach out to Tess. Reach out to through 220.org to Dan Jarvis. We will connect you somehow. If you're interested in getting involved, I mean, money is the mother's milk of everything. We need to train more counselors. We need to get people on the street. And we need to find ways to fund for those homeless veterans and those who don't have insurance or a way to pay for it.
Tess, anything else?
Yeah, our website, ahcnm.org, will have the VCEC program information on it. Doesn't have it yet. By next week it will. But we're going to be growing that resource page and working with Syracuse. They're coming out December 3rd to meet some of our folks to start forming our partnership. I want employer champions. I want employers knocking my door down saying, sign me up. I want to be involved. I want to be educated and informed. I want to do the right thing by our veterans and our military families.
You know, and get great employees out of it too. Don't kid
amazing
yourself.
employees.
That's a great,
Exactly.
it's a win-win for everyone.
And economic job growth too. So anyway, thank you guys so much. This has been great information, specifically going on our veterans. Veterans that are listening, if you listen, please go to our website. We'll put some more information on, but we'll be back right after this.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
If you want to improve your reading skills, don't feel like you're alone. Thousands of us in northern New Mexico can't read or write. I used to be just like you. And today, I not only read and write, I write movies like Blood In, Blood Out. Call the New Mexico Coalition for Literacy today, please, at 1-800-233-7587. Get that tutor, learn how to read and write, and open up a whole new life for yourself. Paid for by the New Mexico Coalition for Literacy and aired in cooperation with this station.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. A compelling show. If I'm learning, I hope our viewers are learning.
And you know, and I think
that's what I love about when I do radio. It's like I know if I'm learning and I'm taking it in, I hope everybody out there in television.
Well, and I think that's why we wanted to do the show today because, first of all, it's Veterans Month. It's Veterans Day
and
Monday.
we love our veterans,
and we
by
love
the
our
way,
veterans.
especially
And we
at
know
Let's
that
Meet
New
in the Middle.
Mexico has a higher percentage. But Tom and I have talked about this.
Well, the
and
military and
the
New Mexico
RTM
are hand in hand.
Hand in hand, and the RTM treatments they're doing is cutting edge. We're leading, and I think we can help so much. And then I really want to test on because I was on the board of the Hispano Chamber for a long time. I saw the work that they did, and I pushed during the campaign. You know, again, to me, everything starts with economic growth and job opportunities. We have a lot of veterans that can't find jobs.
Just reviewing your numbers, you said if we could get veterans more contracts, you're looking at $54 to $75 million of economic
What I try
growth.
to explain to people is we
so
have a lot of
unfunded contracts.
We do have a lot of federal contracts here, right? We agree that 30-40% of our economy.
87 open today.
87 open. So what I'm trying to say is at the federal level, they try to do 3 to 6% of their contracts to veterans. Right now, the last number I looked at was about 0.5%. And the reason we're so low, the reason we're so low is just because veterans either don't have businesses or don't know how to get connected to those contracts
because
to the state.
Let's be honest, the contracts are complicated. You
Very complicated.
You got to jump through hoops. But it sounds like Tessa with the
that's
Hispanic,
what the chamber does.
That's what
the Hispano Chamber does.
And so if you're a veteran out there, I think step one of meeting in the middle is reach out to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
To the Albuquerque Hispanic Chamber of
And
Commerce.
specifically Tessa Latson with the Borealis Economic Opportunity Center. And they're there to help.
Well, and again, that's what I'm saying is, like, when you look at our veterans, there's, look, the service they do is unbelievable. We can't leave them behind. We can't just let them be out there. We know there's different numbers. We know that 50 to 60% of veterans today are homeless. We know that there's 22 veterans a day committing suicide.
That's a horrific.
That's a horrific number.
And you're talking pennies on the dollar. When you're talking about the value of your life, RTM protocol, he was saying even if you had to pay for it out of your pocket, $1,000.
Well, what I'm great to hear is like insurance companies are thinking of starting to cover it.
Well, he's already found a way to get it covered. So you don't have to come out of pocket. And how much you want to bet down the road, Tessa's going to find a way to help veterans get that paid for as well.
Well, and I think
I just have a funny feeling all of this is going to be synergistic.
Well, I think the great thing that the Hispano Chamber's doing is really tying businesses and veterans together. And then Tess is really the leading force behind that. And then again, there's job opportunities, job growth, and business startups. And then you throw in the Small Business Administration, the SBA. John Garcia, who's the head of the SBA, used to be Secretary of Veterans. So he's really trying to push low-interest loans to veteran businesses to help them grow too. So there's a lot of opportunities.
That would be helpful. And I want to make this commitment to this audience, and I'm going to drag you with me. I'm going to get to view one of those RTM protocols,
I want to do that too.
And I want to report back. Because I'm one of those guys who has to see it, because I'm skeptic myself, as you always accuse me of. I always use my common sense. But look, if there's something out there that can really help, and it made such sense where you have this traumatic event and you replay it, they don't make them go through the trauma again. And I think that was the key to understand is they don't make you relive the incident. What they're doing is finding a way for your brain to throw that breaker in a different way. And that to me, if they can do it, and I want to see it, I'll report back to this audience and let you know for sure.
Well, and again, I think that's what's mostly important, because sometimes we just go right down the medication side of it, and clearly that's not working. So I think any other way that we could do is great help. So, but I think a great show today.
Yes.
Going into Veterans Day, God bless our veterans.
And I want to thank everyone out there personally from both of us. Thank you for your service. In case we haven't said that enough, we want to make sure we leave with that thought.
And whether you're, whether you're Vietnam veteran or even most recently, it's real important to reach out to some of these organizations. So, but hey, New Mexico, it's been a great show. I think a great topic today. But
non-controversial.
Non-controversial.
More informative.
Not all of your show. Not every show
is
going to be about arguing about. We knew we were going to be meet in the middle here.
Yes.
But I know you
took
a couple of shots at me about it. But no, it is.
No, I did.
But more importantly,
no
New Mexico,
shots there.
Hey, New Mexico, never give up and always find a way.
Go out and make a difference in the world, and we'll see you next week.
God bless you guys.